Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this remote meeting of Wirral Planning Committee. My name is Stuart Kelly and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website. For those people at home who are viewing the webcast, if you look above the meeting you will see a resources tab. Select this and the link to the agenda will appear on the right hand side. This will enable you to open the agenda reports as PDF documents and follow the discussion. My role is to ensure that the committee runs smoothly, having regards to procedure, behaviour and ethics. To explain who are with us online, planning officers, a highway engineer and an environmental health officer. They will present the applications and provide any technical advice that may be required. The council solicitor. She will give advice to the committee on procedural and legal matters that may arise. There is also the minute taker and of course IT support. The elected members will consider the applications and collectively make the decisions. Voting will be by roll call. Each application will be introduced by the planning officers. Where there is a qualifying petition of 25 signatures or more, I will invite a representative of the petitioners to address the committee for 5 minutes. I will then invite the applicant or their agent to address the committee for 5 minutes. Statutory and local consultees may also address the committee. A ward councillor may also address the committee. Once representations have been made, and following any questions of clarification from the committee, the Speaker may not participate in any debate that follows within the committee. The application will then be open to debate and discussion by members of the Planning Committee, and we will then make a decision on the application. When making decisions, members may only have regard to material planning considerations. It is a matter for each member individually to balance these considerations and to decide what weight to give them. Members will also have regard to local planning policies and to the National Planning Policy Framework and guidance. Members of the committee must not predetermine any matter which comes to the committee for decision. However, it is permissible for committee members to be predisposed toward a particular outcome with regard to an application, provided they don't make up their minds on how to vote before formally considering the application details, listening to the presentations and the full debate at committee. Members must have listened to the debate and considered all the facts before deciding whether or not to move any motion. If a member is minded to put a motion to the committee, it is good practice to first seek advice from the planning officer on the wording of a potential motion. A reminder for members, keep your microphone muted and your camera off until called to speak. Ensure that the chat function is accessible to you. Indicate that you want to speak by typing your request into the chat function. Turn on your camera and microphone prior to speaking. Turn them off again when you have finished. When a vote is taken, the solicitor will call your name. We now need to just check all members are present and that their equipment is working correctly. When I call your name, could you turn on your camera and then your microphone and confirm, please? So we start with Bruce Berry. Are you here, Bruce?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, yeah, I'm present.
Thank you. Andy Corkhill.
Yeah, good evening, I'm present.
Thanks. George Davies.
Thank you.
Steve. Thank you. Kathy, make sure.
Here.
But
Yep.
Yes.
Good evening, Chair. I can hear you.
Stuart with.
Yeah, presence and working.
Thanks. And Irene Williams. If anybody's typing in, no, we'll take that as approved then. Agenda item 2 is the Members' Code of Conduct, Declarations of Interest. Members of the committee are asked whether they have any personal prejudice
parking provision. Access to the development is via the existing access, which will be widened to allow for the additional traffic onto the site. Amenity space is provided to the rear and side of the proposed development. The existing dwelling is some 8.7 metres tall to its ridge. On the plan that's in front of you now, the red dotted line is the existing, the outline of the existing house, superimposed against the proposed apartment block. Which states for every metre difference in ridge height between properties, an additional 2 metres should be added to the interface distance. Objections are suggested that a distance of 22 metres should be achieved in this instance, having regard to that guidance. However, the guidance states that this should be applied where privacy would be unduly affected. In this instance, there are no windows on the neighbouring blank elevation facing the application site, so there is no impact in that regard to that property. There is an existing property on the site that is only 1.3 metres shorter than proposed development at its highest point. Although the proposed comes further towards the rear boundary than the existing dwelling, taking that into account, together with the considerable boundary treatment that is to be retained between the application site and its neighbour, a distance of 17.3 metres is considered to be satisfactory. You can see on the plan that there is a lot of perimeter boundary treatment that's to be retained with this scheme. The site has existing mature trees and shrubs, the majority of which are to be retained, particularly along the site boundaries with Quaker Lane, the adjacent tennis club and the neighbouring property at the rear of the site. Additional internal landscaping will also be provided within the site. It is concluded that
Applicants. Mr. Fletcher, can we hear you?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, excellent. As with the petitioners, you too have 5 minutes to address the planning committee. So if you could introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes, and I'll give you 1 minute. I'll give you a notice when you have 1 minute left of your time. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Martin Fletcher. I'm an architect. I'm the agent for this application. Before you have a very comprehensive report prepared by the planning department and obviously summarised quite well by Mr. Parry Davies. The application before you has been subject to a pre-application inquiry where we engaged with Wirral Borough Council, Planning Department and other statutory bodies. The scheme before you hopefully reflects those comments and delivers a scheme that we felt was made efficient use of the site, was in character and in keeping with the area, taking it
question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Fletcher, in his written and verbal statement, Mr. Carley stated that the applicant has made no attempt to consult local residents. Is that true? And if it is true, why did you not see fit to consult local residents before we got to this stage?
Well,
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Well, we didn't feel that it was necessary. We felt that, we assumed that there was objection to the previous planning application, and nobody likes change. We felt that we'd come up with a scheme that met all the requirements, and we tried our best to produce a sensitive development. In terms of the local residents, there aren't that many. And I understand that the objections or the concerns were to do with amenity. Well, I'm not sure that the proposal affects amenity. Character, it is in character. And safety, we engaged with the highways officer, and we're widening the entrance, providing more than the required level of parking. So there should be no safety impact, an improvement, I would say, in the character of the area, and no effect on amenity of the neighbours. But it wasn't a conscious decision not to. We didn't say, "Oh, I'm not going to consult the neighbours." We just didn't think it was necessary, really.
Okay, thanks for that. Kathy, you have a question.
Yes, this is to the agent. was very happy to hear your comment just now about the entering into a condition with a TPO for the trees around the boundaries. Can you confirm that you would be happy if a blanket TPO was put on by the planning officers for those trees around the boundaries?
I think that will be perfectly acceptable. We have there is a tree report that has accompanied the application, which has highlighted some of the trees are in a poor state of or poor condition. They will need some work and some maintenance. But yeah, a TPO blanket TPO condition will be fine, and then we would engage with the tree officer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any further questions? No, nobody typing. Mr. Fletcher, thank you for your presentation. We'll now open it up to the committee for discussion and debate. Any members wish to contribute? No. Steve?
Well, I wasn't.
Steve Foulkes,
I wasn't going to, Chair. I think there's been a genuine attempt by the developer to give the appearance of what are 9 fairly luxurious apartments, the overall street character of a large house. And if you look at the properties in and around the area, there are some extremely large houses. It's a fairly mixed bag. And to me, in terms of character and appearance for that area, it would not look out of place from the street scene. That's my would be my initial reaction. There's been much made of SPD2, which in the presentation Matthew clearly stated that possibly would be a weak reason for refusal, given his professional interpretation of it. I'm also quite keen to emphasise that, you know, this is a potential development of 9 properties, albeit, you know, we're talking numbers 3 last week, 9 this week. These are valuable contributions overall on the whole scheme of things to the overall housing numbers. So 9 units might seem insignificant on its own, but if we repeatedly refuse this type of development, then that will inevitably put pressure on the drive or the direction of travel in the local plan, and will put more pressure on people turning to green belt development. And if applicants get a whiff, and I say this, get a whiff that the Wirral Planning Committee isn't sort of encouraging of some intensification of current brownfield sites and current sites, then they will have no alternative but to put developments on greenfield or green belt sites. So I'm not saying it's a perfect application, because very rarely applications are perfect in the whole sense. But I actually think there's been a genuine attempt to conform with the street scene aspect of it, and these will be very desirable properties within a very desirable area. So my overall view is that it's more a positive application than a negative application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Thanks, Steve. Steve Hayes?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can only agree with what Councillor Foulkes just said. Actually, I think it's quite a nice looking development from the views, and I feel it does help take some of the pressure off meeting the requirements set by the government for our local plan housing needs. The only thing I wanted to really mention, it was mentioned in the by the applicant's objector that it said notice received by a minimum number of people. A public site notice was not displayed as required by planning notice procedure. So I'm just wondering if that could be clarified by Matthew, if that was possible.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We have statutory obligations placed on the local planning authority for publicising planning applications, and those requirements say that publicity should be done in one of 4 ways. So that's either by neighbour notification, the placing of a site notice, the placing of a press notice, or by publicising applications on our website. We publicise all applications on our website, and we always carry out at least one of the other three in terms of publicising applications. We have guidance that was recently updated this year. That's available for members to see on the web, and the publicity in relation to this application has met both our statutory obligations and the council's own guidance contained in that document.
Thank you for that clarification, just for the record. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let's do Kathy, yours comments.
People that live behind in Rutland will be quite satisfied if the separation distances, although they are met, if there is still greenery for soft landscaping for their privacy. I think one of the problems that people find is that these developments go up. This one I think is actually a nice development. I think it'd be better to the street scene than what's there at the moment. But whenever there is a possibility of a view of the Dee, it is always in the back of people's minds, and it does happen that trees are cut down. And I think it will be very much to the credit of the developer if they ensure that the street scene is preserved, so that there is soft landscaping in front of the car parking, so that on Quarry Road East it will look similar to it as it does now, and certainly going down Quaker Lane, and for the residents in that area, and for Jutland particularly, if it's possible, Matthew, to put a TPO on those trees, and if any of the trees are not satisfactory for a TPO, if they are not very good, that another one is put in for this to the same height, and that has a TPO on it, so we preserve the landscaping. I know there are some possibilities, or residents are a bit concerned about parking issues because you've got the tennis club next door, and that does sometimes have an overspill on the road, and it's quite a busy road because the buses go up and down. I do think for the residents that if there's ever an issue in the future, they can contact their ward councillors who can take that up with traffic, should that be a possibility. Overall, I tend to think that it's a pretty decent application site. I know it's going to be wide in the entrance. The entrance is very narrow at the moment, and that can only be beneficial for anybody going up and down Quarry Road East. So in summary, this application has my support, subject to I would like to see a TPO on all the trees so that they can't be taken down. So over to you then, Matthew, if you wouldn't mind, if you could answer that for me, please. Thank you.
Okay, but before we move into that, I can see that Mr. Carey's put a comment in the comments box. So unfortunately, as I said in my opening remarks, Mr. Carley, there's no opportunity to for the objectors or indeed the applicants to make further comment when the committee and officers are debating the issue. Okay, the issue of TPOs. Obviously, I will hand over to Matthew and Cecilia to go through that. My understanding, putting TPOs on something is a matter for the council, and it's not actually a condition that we can put on the developer because they can't TPO things, only the council can. So it follows a slightly different process. So therefore wouldn't be a condition that we can put on to a developer, if that makes sense. But I'll come back to the point. I think it's worth hearing from Matthew and Cecilia on the issue of TPOs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Through you, Chair. I mean, the point that you've just made is quite right. So the council is the body who is responsible for placing preservation order on trees. So we couldn't condition that for the applicant to do because it, as the chair has quite rightly pointed out, it follows a separate process. We did look at putting a TPO on the site. I'm just going to share a plan with members, which has been part of the tree survey. So hopefully you can see that now. The trees with grey dots. We've had this discussion before, I think, with other applications. So there are different classifications with trees. There's a category A, which are trees of high quality in terms of their amenity value and their health. Then there are category B trees, which are of moderate quality, category C trees, which are of low quality, and then there are the U categories, which are very poor quality or in poor health. So in terms of the boundary trees that you can see here, the majority of those trees are classified as low quality. So that means that they have low amenity value and they are they have low health value as well. Now this application has been assessed by our own internal tree officer, and he agrees with the findings of the tree survey that's been submitted with this application. Notwithstanding that, I can ask Eric to look at the criteria for placing a TPO again, and that would need to follow a different process to the planning application. But having said that, there are 4 conditions on the proposed decision for this application. Condition 4, 5 and 6, which relate to landscaping, the retention of trees on the site, and protective tree fencing around the site as well. And with the exception of these red dotted lines or the trees with the red dots in them, all of the trees are to be retained as part of this scheme. So there are conditions in place that provide protection because the plans that are submitted with this application are conditioned as part of the approval. So so there are trees that are shown to be retained on the site. Protective fencing will be put in place when the development is being brought forward. So we can't condition a TPO, but we can certainly look at it again as part of a separate process. I don't know if Cecilia's got anything further to add to that.
No, I've got nothing further to add. Both the chair and yourself, Matthew, have summarised the position. So. Okay.
Thanks for that. I'll take Bruce Berry next. This question.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify something with Matthew to do with the objector's comment, Mr. Carley, when he raised an issue about the Heswall Society, and he said that there had been an objection which had not been included in the presentation, and the committee are all aware that we did receive that information from the Heswall Society, and that it was to do with separation distances, and that has been addressed tonight by the planning officer. Can you just confirm that, please, for the benefit of anybody watching the webcast?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. So originally, the Heswall Society put forward some comments on this application, and they were generally neutral. So they weren't in support of the scheme, and they weren't a specific objection to it either. but they amended that stance later on and submitted further correspondence to us in which they placed an objection to the application on the grounds that they felt the development didn't comply with SPD2 and specifically the interface and separation distances, which I addressed as part of my presentation earlier this evening.
Okay, thanks for that. Steve Foulkes, will come back.
Yeah, yes, Chair. We have discussed this issue of trees, and until the council is armed with its own tree policy through the tree strategy, we should try and engage with developers as best we can. Quite often when developers come on sites that have been neglected for a number of years or ill-maintained, then there is some trees that have to come down. Some are maybe blatantly unsafe, and we all know to our recent regret what can happen when trees are unsafe. So it's very difficult to say blanketly every tree is safe. I think the developer has shown a willingness to engage with the council, and I think that's all we could ask at this particular point. So my view is that this is a reasonable development, and unless anyone else wants to come in, I'm happy to move approval.
Okay, is anybody else wish to speak? Or okay, I'll take Steve's motion to approve. I did look at this. Obviously, the Heswall Society and the objectors, in my view, their key reason or key planning issue, I feel, is the issue of separation distances, and it reminded me of an application in my ward, possibly last year or maybe the year before, time flies, where we had habitable rooms from an existing house that were going to face a blank gable that was going to be built, and it was within 14 metres of their habitable room. So we refused it on the grounds of SPD2, and it was appealed, and the inspector didn't consider SPD2 to carry that much weight, particularly with regards to this idea that we need to be able to demonstrate that privacy will be unduly affected. That's the opening line of the guidance that's been put in front of us. So separation distances, in my view, they're serving two purposes. One is to do with overlooking, and it strikes me that's the issue that the objectors are most concerned about, and therefore that's the reason that we have a paragraph that talks about increasing the distance as height goes up. But in this case, I am satisfied that there's no harm, no overlooking likely to result to Rutland in terms of overlooking. And the main reason for that is because of the existing trees on the boundary, which are mostly retained and which enjoy heights of about 14 metres. I think it's group 2 and group 3 on the tree plough. 3 trees are coming out. Only one is 14 metres high. The others are 6 metres, I think. But the group as a whole is around about 14 metres. Whilst those trees are there, I don't think it can be demonstrated that privacy at Rutland will be unduly affected. The second reason, obviously, it's not quite as pertinent in this case, but it's the issue of outlook from the habitable rooms, in this case of the new development to the blank gable end. That will occur at ground and first floor levels, and the distance that we're achieving there is 17 metres. So, and again, it's softened by those groups of trees to which we've referred. It's certainly my view that that the presence of the trees leads me to the view that the harm will not be as great, sufficient, I should say, to warrant a refusal. We are conditioning the protection of the trees, and the applicant has indicated that they'd have no objection if the council were to move down a TPO route, and I very much hope that they will, and the ward councillor takes that forward. In terms of the other issues raised, traffic, we have no additional evidence. The highways engineers have not objected to the application. So on planning grounds, I think I think the application probably ought to be approved. Brian, you indicated that you wish to say.
Yeah, Chair, yeah, I just put in the chat box that I'd be happy to second the proposal from Councillor Foulkes that the application be approved.
Very well. We have a motion to approve, moved by Steve Foulkes and seconded by Brian Kelly. Any members, any final comments on that before we move to vote on the application? I'm not seeing any, so I will ask the solicitor to get ready. Voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion before us. The solicitor will call your name. Please turn on your camera and microphone and say who you are before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called. So I'll hand over to solicitor to carry out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Can I call on Councillor Bruce Berry?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Bruce Berry, I'm voting in favour of the planning application.
Thank you. Councillor Corkhill?
Councillor Andy Corkhill voting in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Davies?
Councillor George Davies voting in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Foulkes?
Councillor Steve Foulkes voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Frost?
Councillor Sam Frost voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes?
Councillor Steve Hayes voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson?
Councillor Catherine Hodson voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan?
Councillor Mary Jordan voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly?
Councillor Stuart Kelly voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny?
Councillor Brian Kenny voting for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lewis?
Councillor Ian Lewis voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart?
Councillor Paul Stuart voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Whittingham?
Councillor Stuart Whittingham voting for.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams?
Councillor Irene Williams voting for.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. That application has been approved. That's the only application we have in front of us. Just before we leave and stop the webcast, I understand we only have one meeting in August, on the 25th of August, and over the next couple of weeks members will receive penciled in dates, or actual dates probably, to continue the online planning meetings at least up to Christmas or possibly into the new year. Okay, so we'll get some further dates in our diaries. We were only up to this point. Members of the public and applicants, thank you for your attendance, and officers, thank you for your attendance.